All right, guys, we're getting ready to read the Crucible. And what you need to have in front of you right now to make sure that we're organized is you need to have the character list that looks like this. Whoops, I need to focus. And this is something that you're going to have to follow along with. And we will start this and do part of this together, but you are going to be in charge of updating this to make sure that you understand who all the characters are, because it may be difficult to tell them all apart as you go through. And that seems to be one of the common concerns people have, is making sure they know who everyone is that's speaking. This is what the first part looks like. Okay, we're going to start reading here in a second, but we want to introduce the characters so you know who some of them are. Okay, Reverend Paris. Okay, he is going to be dressed as a Puritan minister. Okay, his role in the community, of course, is he is the minister of the church and a leader. Okay, he is a very proud man. He can be difficult. And he can be seen as argumentative and somewhat greedy as well. Abigail Williams, she is the niece to Reverend Paris. Okay, if we go back up to Reverend Paris, we're going to look at him as being in his early 40s, all the way up to maybe in his 50s. When we look at Abigail Williams, she's going to be between 16 to 18 years old. She's going to be pretty. One of the reasons she's going to have to be pretty is because we're looking at the fact that she is going to be acting as a temptress to an older married man. So something about her has to be tempting to this older married man. Abigail Williams is, she's very prideful. Okay, she's a bully. She feels she deserves more. She is a leader within her group, although through her leadership is not a good one. She is a bully. She takes it through a show force. Leader within her social group. Okay, so girls her age, they follow her. Okay. Then we're going to start meeting other people as we come through. You will update these as we go through, but this is an idea of what you might want to be looking for as we are going through these characters. So we start with Reverend Paris and Abigail Williams. She's going to be 16 or 17 years old. Right now we're going to be looking at this opening portion that comes before we actually start reading the play itself. Right here it says Act 1 and Overture. Okay, and then this is going to be right here. These are what are called stage directions. And it says a small upper bedroom in the home of Reverend Samuel Paris, Salem, Massachusetts, in the spring of the year 1692. There is a narrow window at the left. Through its leaded panes, the morning sunlight streams. A candle still burns near the bed, which is at the right. A chest, a chair, and a small table are the other furnishings. At the back, a door opens on the landing of the stairway to the ground floor. The room gives off an air of clean sparseness. The roof rafters are exposed, and the wood colors are raw and unmellowed. As the curtain rises, Reverend Paris is discovered kneeling beside the bed, evidently in prayer. His daughter, Betty Paris, aged 10, is lying on the bed inert. Okay, and inert means she is not moving. We are to assume that there is something wrong because she is not moving. Continuing at the bottom. At the time of these events, Paris was in his middle 40s. In history, he cut a villainous path, and there is very little good to be said for him. He believed he was being persecuted wherever he went, despite his best efforts to win people and God to his side. In meeting, okay, this is what we would call church, okay, church services of any sort, he felt insulted if someone rose to shut the door without first asking his permission. He was a widower with no interest in children or talent with them. He regarded them as young adults, and until this strange crisis, he, like the rest of Salem, never conceived that the children were anything but thankful for being permitted to walk straight, eyes slightly lowered, arms at the sides, and mouths shut until bidden to speak. Continuing on 67. His house stood in the town, but we today would hardly call it a village. The meeting house was nearby, and from this point outward, toward the bay or inlet, there were few small-windowed, dark houses snuggling against the raw Massachusetts winter. Salem had been established hardly 40 years before. To the European world, the whole province was a barbaric frontier inhabited by a sect of fanatics who nevertheless were shipping out products of slowly increasing quantity and value. No one can really know what their lives were like. They had no novelists and would not have permitted anyone to read a novel if one were handy. Their creed forbade anything resembling a theater or vain enjoyment. They did not celebrate Christmas, and a holiday from work meant only that they must concentrate even more upon prayer. Which is not to say that nothing broke into this strict and somber way of life. When a new farmhouse was built, friends assembled to raise the roof, and there would be special foods cooked and probably some potent cider passed around. There was a good supply of ne'er-do-wells in Salem, who dallied at the shovelboard in Bridget Bishop's tavern. Think about in shovelboard as they were there playing pool and shooting darts might be something that you could similar. Probably more than the creed, hard work kept the morals of the place from spoiling, for the people were forced to fight the land like heroes for every grain of corn, and no man had very much time for fooling around. That there were some jokers, however, is indicated by the practice of appointing a two-man patrol whose duty was to walk forth in the time of God's worship to take notice of such as either lie about the meeting house without attending to the word and ordinances, or that lie at home or in the fields without giving good account therefor, and to take the names of such persons and to present them to the magistrates, whereby they may be accordingly proceeded against. Okay, literally saying that was someone's job to walk through the town and see if there were people who were not at the meeting, and if they were not at the meeting, they were to be reported for not being there. This predilection for minding other people's business was time-honored among the people of Salem, and it undoubtedly created many of the suspicions which were to feed the coming madness. It was also, in my opinion, one of the things that a John Proctor would rebel against, for the time of the armed camp had almost passed, and since the country was reasonably, although not wholly, safe, the old disciplines were beginning to rankle. But, as in all such matters, the issue was not clear-cut, for danger was still a possibility, and in unity still lay the best promise of safety. The edge of the wilderness was close by. The American continent stretched endlessly west, and it was full of mystery for them. It stood, dark and threatening, over their shoulders night and day, for out of it Indian tribes marauded from time to time, and Reverend Paris had parishioners who had lost relatives to these heathen. The parochial snobbery of these people was partly responsible for their failure to convert the Indians. Probably they also preferred to take land from heathens rather than from fellow Christians. At any rate, very few Indians were converted, and the Salem folk believed that the virgin forest was the devil's last preserve, his home base, and the citadel of his final stand. To the best of their knowledge, the American forest was the last place on earth that was not paying homage to God. For these reasons, among others, they carried about an innate resistance, even of persecution. Their fathers had, of course, been persecuted in England, so now they and their church found it necessary to deny any other sect its freedom, lest their new Jerusalem be defiled and corrupted by wrong ways and deceitful ideas. Essentially, what he's pointing out is that the people that sought out the Americas because they did not have religious freedom, as soon as they got here and they had settled, they started denying others their freedoms, which makes them hypocrites. They believed, in short, that they held in their steady hands the candle that would light the world. We have inherited this belief, and it has helped and hurt us. It helped them with the discipline it gave them. They were a dedicated folk by and large, and they had to be to survive the life they had chosen or been born into in this country. The proof of their beliefs' value to them may be taken from the opposite character of the first Jamestown settlement farther south in Virginia. The Englishmen who landed there were motivated mainly by a hunt for profit. They had thought to pick off the wealth of the new country and then return rich to England. They were a band of individualists and a much more ingratiating group than the Massachusetts men. But Virginia destroyed them. Massachusetts tried to kill off the Puritans, but they combined. They set up a communal society which in the beginning was little more than an armed camp with an autocratic and very devoted leadership. It was, however, an autocracy by consent, for they were united from top to bottom by a commonly held ideology whose perpetuation was the reason and justification for all their sufferings. Okay, autocracy, is talking about the concept of how they were formed. Okay, they were held together by this ideology. Their self-denial, their purposefulness, their suspicion of all vain pursuits, their hard-handed justice were altogether perfect instruments for the conquest of this space so antagonistic to man. But the people of Salem in 1692 were not quite the dedicated folk that arrived on the Mayflower. A vast differentiation had taken place, and in their own time a revolution had unseated the royal government and substituted a junta, which was at this moment in power. Okay, junta meaning a small elite ruling council. The times, to their eyes, must have been out of joint, and to the common folk must have seemed as insoluble and complicated as do ours today. It is not hard to see how easily many could have been led to believe that the time of confusion had been brought upon them by deep and darkling forces. No hint of such speculation appears on the court record, but social disorder in any age breeds such mystical suspicions, and when, as in Salem, wonders are brought forth from below the social surface, it is too much to expect people to hold back very long from laying on the victims with the force of their frustrations. The Salem tragedy, which is about to begin in these pages, developed from a paradox. It is a paradox in whose grip we still live, and there is no prospect yet that we will discover its resolution. Simply, it was this. For good purposes, even high purposes, the people of Salem developed a theocracy. A combine of state and religious power, you need to know this, theocracy, a combined state of religious power whose function was to keep the community together and to prevent any kind of disunity that might open it by destruction by material or ideological enemies. It was forged for a necessary purpose and accomplished that purpose, but all the organization is and must be grounded on the idea of exclusion and prohibition, just as two objects cannot occupy the same space. Evidently, the time came in New England when the repressions of order were heavier than seemed warranted by the dangers against which the order was organized. The witch hunt was a perverse manifestation of the panic which set in among all classes when the balance began to turn toward greater individual freedom. When one rises above the individual villainy displayed, one can only pity them all, just as we shall be pitied someday. It is still impossible for man to organize his social life without repressions, and the balance has yet to be struck between order and freedom. The witch hunt was not, however, a mere repression. It was also, and as importantly, a long overdue opportunity for everyone so inclined to express publicly his guilt and sins, under the cover of accusations against the victims. It has suddenly become possible and patriotic and holy for a man to say that Martha Corey had come into his bedroom at night, and that while his wife lay sleeping at his side, Martha laid down on his chest and nearly suffocated him. Of course, it was her spirit only, but his satisfaction at confessing himself was no lighter than if it had been Martha herself. One could not ordinarily speak such things in public. Long-held hatreds of neighbors could be openly expressed and vengeance taken despite the Bible's charitable injunctions. Land lust had been expressed before by constant bickering over boundaries and deeds could now be elevated to the arena of morality. One could cry witch against one's neighbor and feel perfectly justified in the bargain. Old scores could be settled on a plane of heavenly combat between Lucifer and the Lord. Suspicions and the envy of the miserable toward the happy could and did burst out in general revenge. All right, so we want to look at some of these characters before we start. So we had ones that we do want to look at here, okay, that we're going to meet very early on. Okay, I'm going to be going to page, I'm looking here. Page 3. On the bottom, we have Tituba. Okay, she is going to be a black woman. She's a slave. Okay, and she's from Barbados. So yes, she is going to have an accent. She's going to have the look of a slave. She's going to look as if she has been beaten, okay? You know the look of a dog that has been beaten. She's going to look as if she has not been treated particularly well. However, one of her personality traits is she truly cares for Betty Paris, who she has been taking care of since Betty's mother died in childbirth. Betty is now 11 years old, so Tituba has been the primary caregiver in a way because she is female. The father would not at this time have been all that interested in, as we have heard, Reverend Paris was not that interested in children in general. So role in the community, she was the daughter of the minister. And she is going to play a role as one of the accusers. Other ones we want to comment on right from the get-go here is we have John Proctor. Okay, when we meet John Proctor, we're going to see that he is in his he's in his 40s as well. He is a married man with children. He should be seen as handsome and strong physically. He should be seen as strong physically because of his work. His role in the community is he's a prosperous farmer. And he's thought well of. His personality traits. He can be self-deprecating, whereas he is more than willing to point out things that are wrong with himself. He's prideful, and at one point he was definitely selfish and greedy. We know this because we're going to hear very quickly that he has had an affair with Abigail Williams. And yes, he's going to be in his 40s and he has had an affair with a 16 to 18-year-old girl. Now, be aware, this did not happen in reality. Okay, John Proctor did not actually have an affair with Abigail Williams. Abigail Williams, in history, actually was a great deal younger, but as authors tend to do, they will make things a little bit more interesting, and he believed that one way to do that was to essentially manufacture a relationship between John Proctor and Abigail Williams. So he does have a broken affair with Abigail Williams. When this story starts, Abigail and he are no longer together, and he has essentially cast her aside, and Abigail Williams is not okay with this, as we're going to quickly learn. Elizabeth Proctor is going to be John Proctor's wife. And she's well thought of in the community as well. Physical appearance, she can be slightly frail. Because she's going to look like she was as if recovering from illness. Because she is. Personality traits, she's going to be bitter. Okay, remember, one of the things that we see right away is that Elizabeth knows about the affair. Okay, and so she's bitter and she has not forgiven her husband. She can be seen as cold. Okay, she can be seen as speaking sharp words to him. She has not forgiven him. She is not okay with any of this at this point. She should be pretty, but she is going to be mother of 3 boys at this point. So she is going to be a little bit more worn around the edges than perhaps Abigail Williams. But she is still going to be very pretty as well as John Proctor's wife. Reverend John Hale is going to come in quite soon. He's going to be in his 30s. He's going to be a little bit younger. He's going to be seen as handsome. He's going to be seen as intelligent. Okay, his role in the community, he was asked to come in as an expert on detecting witches. I can't spell detect right now. There we go. Detecting witches. Okay, he's going to be genuine. Okay, he's going to believe in his cause. But we're going to have to put something here because he is going to be one of the characters who goes through the biggest change. So I want us to look at him hard through this. Okay, and I want you to be able to identify when we see this man go through this huge change. The other one I want to make sure that we look at before we start is Rebecca Nurse. Rebecca Nurse is going to be elderly. Frail, but is still strong. Okay, she's still able to get around on her own. She does not walk with a cane or anything, but she is essentially wearing out. This would be somebody in their 70s or 80s. Her role in the community, she is very well respected. She's charitable, which means she gives to charity of money and her time. Personality traits, we're going to see her as like kind. We're going to see her like as a grandmotherly figure to not only her own grandchildren, but to everyone's. She's going to be seen as gentle. She's going to be seen as wise. And the way she is treated, especially Rebecca Nurse, essentially brings about the downfall of the Salem witch trials, because with John Proctor and Rebecca Nurse both being of strong moral characters, when they are sentenced to death, people start asking questions. Thomas and Ann Putnam, okay, they are going to be large landowners. They're not especially well liked. Okay, Thomas and Ann, they're going to be probably in their 40s. Okay, they're going to be around the same age as John Proctor. They're going to only have one child. They should not be that pleasing to look at. Okay, these are not a handsome couple. These are going to be people that almost annoy you right at the get-go. Personality traits, they're selfish. They're greedy. They cast blame quite right away. They are more than willing to blame other people for things that they have lost, which is especially important because they only have this one child, and they want to blame others for the loss of this child. So these are the important characters that we are going to see right away that we need to be able to identify and be aware of their role in the community as they come forward. We're going to stop the video at this point because we're going to be starting to read the Crucible.